Hello, welcome to my tutorial for the Harmony bag by Shamballa Bags. This is a fringe bag that was real fun to do, and I hope you find it as much fun. I thoroughly enjoyed picking the different layers of fabrics that I wanted to use. The world's your oyster, you could pick all sorts. Anyway, I should get on with the tutorial. I hope you enjoy it. Happy stitching. To begin with, I like to go over the items I'll be using and the pattern pieces, etc. So what I use, I do like my little gadgets, but it's things that I find very useful. Things like my twist punch. That's instead of using one of these. And that's because I find using one of these, this can go in at an angle sometimes and come out the other side not straight. So I tend not to use these too much. I use my twist punch, and you get the various dies and you just literally twist. And you must have a poly board, because if you use it on your cutting board, it will damage it. Even if it's a self-healing one, you're cutting holes out. So use a poly board. I got them together. I got these from the trimming shop, I believe, or Tandy store for this. But Amazon, Amazon's fine. I have my micro stitch gun. This is by Avery Dennison, and it's a micro stitch gun. It just inserts little tags. So you've got a sharp needle, you push it in, and out comes a tag. Like the sort of tag you get in those shops, the plastic little tags. I don't always use this, it depends. You need to have sort of thick layers because they're so long. Otherwise it just slides anyway. So it depends on what I'm doing as to whether I use this or not. And I've got a handy little tool here that you just slide along and remove them afterwards. Otherwise you can just snip them out. So that's my micro stitch gun. And if I don't use that, I've got my stapler, which I love. This is a particular type of stapler because a normal stapler goes out too far at the bottom and you can't be so precise. So this is a much more precise weapon of choice. This is great for clipping your bags and sewing when you're going around curves, etc. Make sure that if you're using staples that it's not within the stitch line. You don't want to damage your machine or break your needles. So I always put it so that they're really close to the edge of the fabric. And then afterwards I slip them out nice and easily with my staple remover. It's just better than using pins and clips and everything. It just keeps everything where it should be and stops fabric slipping. So that's what I like to use. I've got my craft knife. I have various different blades, but this is the one that I use to go through for marking for prongs, for like the handmade label, for can't think what they're called. Magnetic clasps, that's it. So that's the craft knife. I use a hammer. When we fold the prongs down on a handmade label, they can still sort of sit slightly proud, so I just hammer them flat so that they're nice and smooth. I've got my pens, my heat dissolvable ink pens. These are lovely. I get these from Amazon. If you just go on Amazon and put heat dissolvable ink pens, lots of pens like this will come up. There's no brand name. They're called many different things. Yeah, there's no brand name on them. But yeah, so they're absolutely fabulous. I get, I think, 12 pence for £5. It's crazy chop prices. I've got my roller, my leather roller or vinyl roller. This helps to get the double-sided tape to stick to your vinyl, and it also gives nice creases, etc. So I always use that. I've got my various cutters. I've got my cutter for snipping double-sided tape, etc. My thread snipper, and this is what I use to snip round the curves for the bag, etc. Our screwdriver for our little screws. Double-sided tape. Now, I buy this from Anne Foy of Bag Kits and Glitzy Bits Facebook group. This is, I think, £8.50 for 50 metres. It's 4mm wide, and it is sewable. It's a German brand, Farben Mix de, or de. Oh gosh, that's a mouthful. It's as I say, it's German, but it's lovely and it is sewable. So I use it sparingly. I only use it where I'm going to be sewing on. So that's what I use that for. Otherwise, from Anne on, as I say, Bag Kits and Glitzy Bits Facebook group, I buy these. They vary in price. This I think is either 3 or 3mm tape. I think you get 30 metres, and I think it's 60 pence, 50 pence, something like that. And then this is the 6mm one, I think was 90 pence a roll. But anyway, very, very good price when you think of that. But it's not sewable. The thinner one you could probably get away with sewing sort of over it, but not along it. But this does gum up my needle. I've tried various size needles. I've used it on 2 machines and it gums it up. But it is super sticky, so it's brilliant for sticking down vinyl, because vinyl doesn't always like double-sided tape. So I use this for my straps, etc., where I'm not going to be sewing along. I place it where it won't sew. But it is fantastic double-sided tape. The best I've found anyway. My glue, Gutterman HT2 glue. I love this glue. It's absolutely superb, and it dries very quickly. And it's washable and it's sewable, etc. An alternative is Fabric Fusion by Aleene's. This was quite pricey, and I bought it to try, and I don't get on with it. It's you put it on the vinyl to stick vinyl together, and it doesn't stick. It just sits there and it gets soaked in and so on. So I'm very selective on what I use this on. But I personally won't buy it again. But you may get on with it, I don't know. But that's my glue. I've got my quilting pins. I use quilting pins because they're long and thin and they're nice to go in and out. I've got my sewing clips. I love these. These are quilting clips. Again from Amazon. These are by Ottomax, but they're just brilliant. They've got a slight curve up, so they go on nice, and they don't mark your vinyl. They are superb. Again, I got it from Amazon. And then our clips. I used to buy clover clips, which are very expensive. Then I started buying the unbranded ones, and they are just as good. They are no different. They last as long. So that's what I buy now. I do not buy the clover clips because they are pricey. I've got my little flamethrower, my barbecue lighter. Various jobs, such as sealing the end of zips. But yeah, there'll be various points that I'll want to use that. I've got my rivets, and I'm using 9mm caps and 9mm posts. And then my hardware. I'm using connectors. I'm not using the connector pattern piece for vinyl. I love to use the connectors, and I always use these. I get these from eBay. The seller is Sally Sunshine. She doesn't often have them listed, but if you email her, she will list 10 packs or whatever so that you can buy them. But 95% of my bags have them on. Bag feet. Now, I'm going to show you all the hardware that I buy from Anne Foy on bag kits and glitzy bits. You can get all these from Anne, and they are super, super cheap. She charges very little. Amazing lady. She's really assisted me in my bag making. So these are bag feet, square bag feet, love them. And that's the thing with Anne, you get things that you don't normally see around. So I bought 6 bag feet and 6 screws. This is a zip end. How unusual is that? Love it. Again from Anne. My strap ends from Anne. I get a lot from Anne. And the final thing, oh no, there's 2 things from Anne. My slider, 1-inch slider, and my tassel cap. I buy lots of these. And then, I can't remember where from, but you can get these from everywhere, is the Handmade label. Anne does them as well, but I just bought them on a job lot ages ago. Then I get my label, which Bags of Love by Diane. I get these made up by Name Tape Express. I think it's £10 for hundreds. I can't remember how much now, but how many. But I love having these. And then something I try to remember to use is this little piece of vinyl, which is 1/7/8 of an inch long and 7/8 of an inch deep, that I put behind my label. I don't always remember to use it, so we shall see. And the other thing, again, which I bought from Anne, are my zipper pulls. This, unfortunately, is no longer available. I bought a lot, 18 of them. I love them. It's absolutely gorgeous, but Annie's getting a different style in. Anne makes these, and I think they're brilliant. So these are for the number 3 zips, and they're smiley faces to go with the external zip. I'm actually making an internal zip pocket and an external zip pocket on the back of the bag. Not in the pattern, that's me doing it separately. My piping, I buy 3mm piping. I normally buy the nylon type piping, so that when I cut it, I set light to it and it seals the ends. I didn't realise when I bought this that it's like the type of one you use for macrame. It's like it's spun like woolies, and so it unravels. So what I do is I just get a bit of my Gutterman glue and I put it on the end and just sort of do that with it, and then it dries, and that keeps it, stops it from unravelling. And on the end of this I put a little tiny bit of tape just to keep that in stock. And I got this from Amazon. That's 100 metres for not very much, so I can't remember, but it was a really good price. So that's all the bits and bobs that I use. And don't be frightened of piping. Years ago I used to be very nervous about piping. But I just practiced and I just played about with it. I just practiced on gash materials. I don't use a piping foot, I use a zipper foot. And yeah, I'm much more well practiced at it now. And you need to be, because Shamballa Bags, Sammy likes to use piping. And I understand why, because it looks really nice. You don't have to do the piping if you don't want to. But I think it does look really nice with it. So if you can, do. Okay, so all the pattern pieces, various pattern pieces. Right. So I've cut tassel pieces. These I'm using to make my tassel. And I've cut 1.5 inch widths, 6 inches long, and I've done 2 of each. I will sew them along the top, then roll up, etc, etc. I'll show you when I come to do it. 2 zipper facing pieces, one for inside, which is that one, and one for outside. My slip pocket piece, and I've done this and it measures 12 inches, 10 inches long, 12 inches across. My 2 zipper pocket panel pieces, the sizes in the tutorial written instructions. I don't give out pattern sizes online because I'm basically giving away a pattern, and that's not fair to the designer. I've got my strap pieces. Now, the pattern calls for 1 strap piece. I'm not giving away too much by saying 4 inches wide. I like to do sort of, you'll see what I'm going to do, but I've cut this one at 2 inches wide and this one at 1.78 of an inch wide, slightly narrower, and the required length. I've got my contrast gusset piece, which is on the inside at the top of the bag in white. Now you're probably going to think I've gone balmy because the lining contrast band that I'm using inside the top is black. And this is going to be white, so you're going to have white ends and black sides. But that's because the gusset on my bag is white and the top is black on the sides, on the front and back. So I didn't want the chance of white poking up over black or black poking up over white, so I'm keeping it matching, so that when you're looking down on it, it's all smooth. It's black and black, white and white. So I've got my contrast and my lining gusset pieces. My exterior gusset. Now, I know we've got pattern pieces for the foam, and they're smaller than the gusset, for example. Now, I don't fuse my foam to anything, ever. I actually use flex foam, Pellon flex foam, and it's non-fusible. I really like it. So I cut it to the same size as the gusset piece, and I base stitch it down the sides. And then when I've sewn my bag, I trim the foam out. And that's how I attach my foam. So I've cut mine out to the same size as the fabric piece. And I do the same with the main panel as well. I don't use this piece. I do the main panel piece. Now I had a think, I'm using black, white and houndstooth, black and white houndstooth. And I had a think and I planned out what I was going to use where. So I've got black sides and I've got part black and part white and houndstooth on the front and back. This is my bottom piece. So I've got the white sides and I've got this on the bottom. And this is my lining piece. And then I've got my foam piece. This is my lining gusset. My piping, which is going to be in black. My zipper panels. This is for the top of the bag. Everything's in black. Black lining and black vinyl. My top band, which I'm doing in black. My underneath contrast fringe, which I'm doing in white. And the other fringe I'm doing in black. So I shall show you a rough idea of how it's going to look. Like so. So that's how I'm doing my bag. I've got the black piping and the white sides and the houndstooth bottom. So hopefully it will look good. I did think about putting the houndstooth on the black top, but I thought no, I want to keep it like that. Don't mess about with it. I've done my foam panel pieces the same size as the main panel. And then I've got my lining pieces. And I've interfaced all the lining fabrics with medium weight interfacing. I buy this from Cracker Fabrics or Crackers Fabrics Facebook group from Shirley Evans. It's called Cotton Woven and it's fantastic. Super price. I buy it 25 metres and I can't think how wide it is, but it's huge. And it's really, really fuses well, and it gives a good strength to your fabrics. I think that is everything. So I shall be back next with the start of the tutorial, but that's the end of this section for now. This is the section on how to make the fringes. I've gone ahead and done them only because my eyesight is really poor at the minute. I need to get new glasses, but I'm having to do close up to see, and I couldn't have done that with the camera. But I shall go over what I've done. First of all, the black vinyl I'm using is very thin. I mean wafer thin. It's not even a millimetre thick. And when I cut the fringes, it was just too floppy. I just realised there was going to be no strength to them. They might come off easily. Plus the colour on the back was showing through quite a lot. And I just didn't like it. So I ummed and ahed about changing the vinyl. But the only thick vinyl that I've got that's thick enough in black is a herringbone pattern, which wouldn't really work. Or cork, black cork. But then I looked in my stash and found that I had some black faux suede. So I glued it to the back of the vinyl. I tested it first to make sure that this vinyl could have glue and it wouldn't burn, leave a burn mark on the other side. And the test was fine. Always test a piece of vinyl first, because a lot of vinyls do not like glue and it just burns through to the other side. And the glue I used for this was the Aleene's leather and suede glue. I got this from Amazon. It's taken at least 18 hours to fully dry. So I left it for 24 hours just to make sure. I put a lot on, a heck of a lot on, and I pasted it all over with one of these little things like I remember from school. So I put it all over, but I made sure I didn't scrape it on and scrape it off, because it wouldn't have left enough for it to stick. I really wanted to make sure it was going to stick, and I went right to the edges all the way round, and I made sure that the glue was absolutely everywhere. And then I laid it onto a rectangular piece of the faux suede. I used my roller to roll it everywhere to make sure it was really stuck down and it glue spurt out of the side. I'd go like that, and then I'd wipe the roller. Otherwise, when you went like that again, the glue would have come off. So I just went like that all the way around, just to make sure it covered everything. I left it to dry, and then on the reverse, I drew, I'm going to turn my iron on, I drew the lines, and I drew the line for this. And what I've done with the pattern piece is I cut one side so that I could draw the line, and then turned it over to draw that side. Now what I initially did was I cut out every other line. So I cut out one piece, so it was like a thick comb, but it didn't really work, because when I laid down and drew the lines were thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin. That's a mouthful. So I hand drew my lines, and I got my ruler, and I literally did 1/4 of an inch all the way, 1/4 of an inch, and it was the right size. It worked fine. So I'm just getting rid of the iron marks, the pen marks, sorry. I wanted to keep them in to show you. Okay, so that's the pen marks gone. So that's the one fringe, and it's really quite nice and firm as well now, so there's no worries about it being too delicate. With the white, that was okay because it's got like a felt backing on the back, so it's quite thick itself. And so that sits on top of that, and then I've got the top part, which is the top band, like so. Now I did exactly the same for pieces A and B by cutting one side out, then hand drawing, and then cutting the lines. I used my rotary cutter to cut my lines and went so far, and then just used my snippers to snip to the top. You want to make sure that the lines are very even. With the top band piece, I've gone ahead and instead of drawing 1/4 inch in, I've drawn 1/2 inch in, because that's where we're going to fold to the line. And I've also put the holes in for the rivets. Now I know I've got to go through all the other layers first, but I wanted to draw the dots for the rivets and have them sorted so that when we lay it on top, we can see where we need to put the holes. So that's the only reason why I've done that. So we need to use, if you're using double-sided tape, you need to make sure that you're using one that's sewable, or that isn't going to be in the area for sewing. So I'm using the German sewable double-sided tape that I buy, as I mentioned at the beginning. Now, as you can see, we've got curves, and with curves it means it's going to need cutting. So we don't want to cut too far in. It's not even 1/4 inch, and you just need to cut where it curves. Like so. And then I'm folding up to the line that I've drawn. And as you can see, they've spread out because of the curve. And you want to make sure that you've got a very good point here. So that's all 3 pieces prepared to add to the main panel. Now we need to get one of our front panel pieces, and we need to add the fringes in layers. So I'm making sure that we match up with the pointed part here. And as you can see, they don't go to the edge. They're not meant to go to the edge. You haven't done anything wrong if you think you have. And then clip your panels together. And now we stitch along this edge as close as we dare, down and then back up again. Okay, so I've stitched around, did some beautiful stitching, very happy, and then I noticed something. It's very slight, but it's there and it's not good enough. But the point of this isn't matching the point of here. I'll show you. I mean, you may be able to see it from there, but I'm not sure. But if I did there to there, see how it just goes off? It needs to be like that. So it's literally 1/8 of an inch out. I should have made sure that lined up. I should have used double-sided tape to do that. So I'm actually going to unpick this. It won't hurt because I'm going to be using the same stitch line, so it's not going to look, I'm not going to have lots of holes in the vinyl. I'm going to unpick it and then I'm going to relay it, but I'm going to use double-sided tape to fix it in place so it doesn't shift in the machine. I wanted to show you that, and just to show you that it happens to us all. Right, so this time I layered every piece with double-sided tape in the top, just to make sure each one laid down correctly, and it just peels away nice and easily, as you can see. So I used the tape that can't be sewn, because I wasn't sewing along here. I mean, we don't have to worry about moving that, and you'll see why in a second. The only place I do want to remove it from is this one. That's it. So I wanted to show you, once I laid it all down, I made sure that each point matched. And as you can see, these are the points. So I'm very happy where that is. A loose thread there. And there's my stitching. I literally stitched 1/16 of an inch. So that's the foam. That's the fringing added. And now what we need to do is cut away the excess. We don't need all this vinyl. So we cut away roughly 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm doing one layer at a time. You can do all the layers together if you want to, but I just think you have better control if you're doing one layer at a time. Now, if you want to, what I'm going to do is not cut this all the way to the edge, because I want to have like a graded seam allowance, rather than having a sort of chunky ledge that you can see through. I wanted to just have it slanting, so it's like that rather than like that. So I'm just going to do, I couldn't get it close enough with these big scissors. There we go. So you can see I've done the different layers. And that's the fringing done. You can, if you want to, do fringing on the back, but I'm doing something else. Okay, for this part I'm going to add a zip pocket on the back, the exterior back. So if you don't want to do that, you'll just need to skip this part of the tutorial. You could also, if you wanted to, do the fringes on the back just like you did on the front, if you want to, or leave it plain. You really have a huge choice of things you can do. So I'm just turning this upside down. What I need to do is cut out the rectangle box that I need to. So I've cut this 8 inches long and 1.5 inches deep. If you go to the Shamballa Bags website and look at the tutorials, it tells you how to do the zip pockets there. And this is exactly the method that I'm doing. So I draw a line 1/2 inch up and start and finish 1/2 inch in from each end. And I draw a box line at the end. And so we end up with a rectangle box that I'm just going to cut out. Okay, so I've cut the box out, so I've got a 7 by 1/2 inch hole, and I just put some double-sided tape along the outer edge. And I just want to mark the halfway point to know where to line it up. And I want my deeper ruler. And I'm putting this 3 inches down from the top edge. And it ends up being 1.5 inches down from this point. That's why it's so far down. Normally it'd be 2 inches or 2.5 inches. And I've lined the ruler up so it's central with this pointed bit. Just wanted to make sure as well that it's dead straight. Okay, so I just want to check. I measure a lot because I want to make sure that it's all correct and very even. So that measures 2.5 on that side, and that's a little under 2.5. Oh no, that's right. Okay. So what I need to do now is stitch around the outer edge of the box. Okay, I stitched all the way around the outside, and now we need to cut the inside away. And I go to about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from the box that we've stitched. And now we need to put some double-sided tape along the edge of the box here, and I'll just take off one row for now, otherwise we get into a bit of a hot mess with the zip. And we just place it just want to make sure that I'm very happy with the position. Because I want it to, the zip to sit evenly. That's good to me. And then move like so, and then put some more double-sided tape now along the inside of the stitching. And peel the bottom double-sided tape off, and then get one of your zipper pocket lining pieces, the same measurement as the pattern gives for the inside pocket. The zip's the same measurement, everything is the same measurement as the pattern gives for the inner zip pocket. So I've laid that there, and now I'm just going to stitch along the bottom. Okay, the start and end, I don't double stitch, I leave long threads. I did the same, I should have mentioned, I did the same with the outside box. And then what I do is turn over and I pull on the thread, and it pulls the loop up of the top thread, and I pull the thread through it. That easy. she says. There we go. And then I tie the threads off. If you have difficulty pulling the top thread through, just put it into a needle and sew it through as such. But either way is good. And then tie it off. I always tie it 3 times. Don't know why. And then snip those threads. And then I want to pull the pocket lining down, finger press, and then pull the tape off and fold it up to the edge. And then we take it to the machine and we stitch up the side, along the top and down the side. And as before, I left the threads long and I just pull the top thread through and tie these off as I did before. And that way you've got no unsightly double stitching on the vinyl. And the final thing to do for this pocket is to stitch down each side. So there we have the zip pockets done on the exterior. So that's both exteriors completed. The only thing left to do that I'd like to do is add my handmade label, which I will be adding down the bottom here. It's entirely up to you whether you add one. You could add one up here. In fact, I'm just wondering actually whether to do that. I think I will, in which case I'm not going to add that yet, because I don't want it to get in the way of everything that we're doing. I'm going to hold off for now and decide shortly. So that is our 2 outer panels complete. And next we'll be doing the piping, making it and adding it. Before we go ahead with the piping, I just want to add my foam. Now, there is a pattern piece for the foam, which is smaller than the pattern piece for the panel. However, I don't fuse my foam to my fabric, ever. In fact, I buy non-fusible foam. I use the Pellon Flex foam. And I actually stitch it into the seams and then trim the foam out of the seam allowance. I prefer the result I get from this. I once fused the foam to my bag, and when I turned it right side out, it wrinkled, and then I tried to iron it and it just got more wrinkly, and I just learned from that day on never to fuse the foam. So what I do is I cut it to the same length as the panel, and I just base stitch on a very long stitch. I do it on number 6 on my machine, down the sides. I don't worry about the bottom or the top. I just want to have a temporary hold of it. And the reason why I do the long base stitches is because, or basting stitches, is because I'll just trim them out to be able to get the foam out of the seam allowance easily. So I'm going to do that with both panel pieces, and I've done the same with the gusset and the base, or the bag bottom. I've got them to the same size, and I shall attach them, and then it will be time to do the piping after that. So I've added the foam to all the pieces now. And I'm going to put these aside to make the piping. And follow the measurements in the tutorial for the length of the piping. And what I like to do is, I'm just checking for the length of the piping versus the thing, yeah. I like to run some double-sided tape along the centre, but I don't start at the very end. I leave about 1 inch because we have to sort of just trim the piping out of the end as it goes into the seam. So I want to be able to access it and cut it away easily. So I've run some double-sided tape along the centre. I didn't measure or draw lines. It just doesn't have to be exactly spot on. It needs to be just be near enough. Okay. And then I get some double-sided tape that's the sewable one. Again, not going right to the end because I want to be able to access the ends. And then we fold over to meet the edges. You don't have to use double-sided tape. If you want to take it to the machine without the tape and stitch it in place, that's fine. I just like to make life easier, as easy as possible. And then I just use my roller to roll along and then I use my zipper foot and I just stitch along here, starting again further in, and just to keep this closed, really, nothing else. But I don't go too close to the piping because I don't want any stitching to show on the other side of the bag. Okay, so I've got my piece of prepared piping and I just want to mark, I'm just going to trim the foam that's poking out from under here. I want to mark the centre of the panel and the centre of the piping. So, just marking for the centre of the piping, the panel, I beg your pardon. And then I just fold clip and I just want to place the piping around the panel, and once I know I've got the piping in the right place, I'll cut some notches in the piping to help it go around the curve more easily. And I've got the panel piece here, the pattern piece, and we've got the piping marking there. We just mark for where the piping needs to end. So it will go off here like so at an angle. Okay, I think I'm happy that that's even. So what I'm going to do now is something you'll probably think I'm a bit strange doing, and that is getting my micro stitch gun. Because I've got a few layers, it will happily go through and keep that in place. Now this is the micro stitch gun by Avery Dennison. I got this on Amazon many years ago. It's still available, and you get these little tags, and it's just like the shop tag with the clothes, and I pop it in and it just keeps it in place until I sew it. It means I can get the pins out, the clips out of the way, and so on. Now, if this was really thin, if I didn't have foam and it was just 2 thin layers of vinyl, I would use my stapler. Which you're probably thinking, well, that's strange stapling, but it's really good. It helps with keeping it in place, and so long as you don't staple where the seam allowance is going to be stitched, you're fine. You don't want to mess your machine up or your needles up by putting the staples in the wrong place. But on this occasion I can use my micro stitch gun, and now I'm just cutting notches or slits in the vinyl to go around the curve. It will just help it move around more smoothly. And I'm just going to cut this piping out, which will allow this to have a nicer edge. I just want to show you as well, I bought this tool, it's it removes them. You just literally slide like that. Very easy to do and worth getting. Okay, trim the piping again. So that's the piping temporarily attached with the micro stitch gun. I mean, if you want to, you can actually leave them in place. They're not going to cause any problems, but I like to cut them off. I try to keep the inside of my bag that isn't seen as tidy as possible, just so that I know it's tidy. So I'm just going to base stitch this in place, and then we'll be adding the gusset, but we need to prepare the gusset first. So that's that part, that's the piping added, maiden added. I'll do exactly the same with this piece and this, so that the piping will be added to both sides. And what we're going to do in the next part of the tutorial is to add or make and prepare the gusset and bottom for adding. Okay, I've put the piping onto both panels. I decided not to base stitch it in because the micro stitches are holding it quite nicely, and because I trimmed the foam out of the seam allowance, it just avoids having to mess about removing all the stitches. So they're both ready for the gusset to be added. So we pop that aside, and now it's time to prepare the gusset. So I've got my gusset pieces with the foam attached, and the bottom piece. And on the gusset piece you have a line here for the connector, and all I do is, because I laminate my pattern pieces, I use a craft knife to cut a slot out, so that then I can place it on the gusset, draw a line inside it, and there I've got my line for adding my connectors. Now, as I showed you at the start, I'm using metal connectors, these, so I don't need to make the connector, but I wanted to show you what to do. I couldn't find my pattern piece for the connector because I'm not using it. I put it aside and I don't know what I did, so I've not got the right size for the connector. I've just cut a piece of vinyl out to just show you. And what I need to do is draw a line down the centre. Again, this is really just to show you, so I'm not being exact. Draw a line down the centre, place double-sided tape on each side of the line, and remove the backing. Oh, goodness me, doesn't want to come away. Finally, goodness me. Right, then we fold the outer edges into the centre, to the line that you've drawn, which isn't there at the minute. And that's all you do with them. Now, if you're going to sew this to the gusset, do not stitch this now. But if you're adding rivets, you can stitch this first and stitch down the sides. Now the pattern piece is long enough for two connectors, So at this stage, cut it in half. And then what we need to do is, looking for my D-ring, just slip the D-ring on, and you've got the folded edges on the inside. Fold the connector band down. I'm going to have to cut this to show you. So let's say that's cutting it in half. And so you fold that down, use a bit of double-sided tape to keep that in place, and fold this piece up. So you're hiding the raw edge. You see? And then you can add it. Now, if you're sewing it, then you haven't sewn around this at all. So you just literally stitch a box. If you're adding rivets to it instead of stitching, you'll have stitched down the edges, which is fine. So just like a top stitching. And then what you need to do is add a rivet in this half and a rivet in this half. So you're getting both edges of the connector strip riveted. And it's as easy as that. So that's how you do it. However, I'm adding my connectors, so I've drawn the line, and I use the line as a guide for where I want the connector to add. So I want to mark the center point of the gusset. So 1/4 plus 1. And I've got the center of the connector washer. So I've drawn the circles, the dots. I want to make sure they're equal. Honestly, just measure, measure and measure. Yes, they are. You really need to measure well, just to make sure everything's where it should be. And I'm happy with the placement. And now what I do is punch holes. In fact, I need a larger punch hole, because I want the screws to basically go all the way through. I'm using the largest punch I've got because I want them to be big enough for these to pop into the holes. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm using my twist punch. No, it hasn't gone all the way through. I'm being a bit weak tonight. I have to do that. Right, so hopefully that's got it. Yeah. I just use the scissors to snip a bit of foam out. I could have done a better job of twisting it, but I'm having a little trouble with my hands today with my arthritis, so I don't really have the strength. I should have asked my hubby to do it. So there we've got the holes punched, and what I do is, as you can see, I've made them big enough for the posts of the connector to go all the way through. But we're not adding that yet. It's too soon. I don't add the connectors until towards the very end. Always worth keeping some water on standby and use that to rub away the blue ink instead of the heat thing, or just use a wet wipe. Simple. And then I do exactly the same with the other gusset. So that's the gusset prepared for the connectors, and I'm going to be adding some bag feet, so I need to mark where I want the bag feet to go. Bearing in mind we've got the seam allowance for sewing, I'm not going to put holes. I'm just going to give myself a rough guess of where I want the bag feet to go. So I think they'll be too narrow. I'm going to scratch that. I'm going to mark the feet once I've put the bag together to get a good idea, because I'm really not sure where they're going to end up. So that's probably the best thing to do, is to wait. So now we need to make the gusset, and we put them right sides together and stitch across at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so here's the gusset that I've made, and what we did was I stitched at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I trimmed the foam out of the seam, and then I folded the seam towards the centre of the bottom, and then just top stitched along the edge, and I did that both sides. Now I've marked the halfway point on the gusset, and I get my panel piece, and I've marked my halfway point on the panel piece as well, and we need to start by placing those together. And you guessed it, I get my micro stitch gun. And I go round want to follow the curve around. Watch your fingers, because this needle for the gun is very, very sharp. Didn't take that time. And we keep going round until we get to the top, and we do it both sides. So I'm going to carry on doing that and come back and show you when I've attached it. Okay, so I attached the panel to the gusset, and then I stitched all the way round close to the piping. And then what I like to do is, when I finish stitching, is turn it right side out and check that I have all the piping caught in nicely and that there's no huge amount poking out. And then once I've done that, I also just need to snip the curve to help the vinyl sit in a nicer way. And you can trim the seam allowance if you care to. I don't always trim it. I see how I feel, to be honest, and how it feels. And I do find, because we have piping, I found it doesn't really make a difference whether I trim the seam allowance or not. And so long as it's curving nicely, then I tend to not worry too much. But just see how you feel. If I did trim the seam allowance, I'd trim them separately, because you don't want to trim it all together, because you're just going to have a ledge. If you trim in layers, it'll have a slant, so it's smoother and it feels less bulky. So I never trim all 3 layers together. I do them at different lengths. So this one, for example, I trim close to the seam. And then, sorry if you hear my husband coughing in the background. I'm doing this in the lounge, in our family home. So, that's trimmed that. And then the next one, I'd trim, I'm just showing you, for example, you know, a little bit less. I mean, I would do it a bit more differently. I've not gone close to the seam with the other layer, so I would trim a bit more. But this is just really to show you exactly what I mean. So you've got 1, 2, 3 layers. And that's a nice smoother line than a thick, like this thick wedge here. So it just gives it a much nicer feel. Anyway, it's now time to add this one also. So I'm going to do exactly the same as before. And when you're adding this panel, make sure you're not catching the fringe in the seam. You may just want to slightly move them out of the way and maybe put a bit of tape there, or just make sure when you're stitching it doesn't go under like that and get caught. So I've sewn her all the way around, checked everywhere, happy with the piping. And what I did was I went to where I marked the feet earlier and I punched the holes. And by doing the holes, I put my poly board inside my bag and then use my screw punch to twist the holes in the bag. And I'm using these feet for the first time. They're little square feet, quite unique. They come with like a little plastic film, and I just cut them, and I've left the film on for now because it saves them getting scratched whilst you're making the bag. And it's worth leaving them on until you either give your bag or sell your bag to the new owner, unless you're having it for yourself, in which case you can just take them off anyway. So screw the feet on, and I punched the holes so that they were big enough for the screws to go through. And I'm just literally hand tightening them first before I go in with the screwdriver. So I shall return when I've stitched it all. Okay, I've had to swap feet. I didn't realise, but I've tightened these up as tight as they would go, and as you can see, there's quite a gap from there, whereas this style is screw-in foot, it's snug. Now I put 3 pieces of foam together and put them inside, and that's what it took to make these snug. But you'd have felt them through the other side. When you put your hand into the bottom of the bag, you'd have felt these 3 pieces in 6 spots piled up, and I didn't like it. So these feet will have to be saved for a day where I'm using thicker vinyl, because this is thin vinyl, and my thicker foam, the flex foam. I've used Bosal foam for this bag, so thicker foam, thicker vinyl. So I'm going to screw these round feet in instead, and then I shall come back when I've done that. Okay, that's all the feet attached, looking nice. They're nice and snug, so I'm happy with that. And now I've come to the top, and I punched holes earlier on, but they hadn't punched through the foam because I did them when I first cut the pattern out. So I just put my poly board inside under the foam, and then used my twist punch to punch the holes. And I also added an extra hole. The holes ended there, but I just felt it needed another one, so I pierced another hole. And I'm using 2 different size rivets because I just thought it looks nice. So these are 6-inch diameter 8-inch posts and 9-inch diameter with 9-inch posts. 9-inch, oh my goodness, imagine 9mm, sorry. So I'm alternating them. So I'm going to fix all these on, and then I'm also going to attach my handmade label, which I decided to put up the top here rather than down the bottom. So I don't need to use that piece of faux leather that I cut earlier that I saved just in case I added it there. So I'm going to add all these, and then I shall come back to you when that's done. Right, I've added all the rivets, pressed them all down so they're all sat nicely on there, and I think it looks nice having the alternate sizes. And now I want to add my handmade label, and what I've done is I've marked up already, and I used these points to get the straight size, and then I marked a line that was 1 inch long and did a centre point and so on. Then I got my washer, placed it over the centre mark and did the lines for the prongs to go through, and I used my craft knife to cut the 2 holes. I'm sure you've seen them added, or even probably added them yourselves lots of times. And then I just pop the label through check that it looks straight, and then fold the teeth over, and I just want to get my hammer, and I always do this, just to hammer them down nice and flat. Yeah. So there's the exterior made so far. Oops. And just so that we don't fill the label through the bag, I'm just going to add a small amount of foam and glue it. And press that down, and then put this aside to dry. I haven't added the side connectors yet. I don't add them until the very end, so that they don't get in the way when I'm sewing the top together. So on with the lining next. Okay, for the first thing we need to do for the lining is to prepare the gusset. And what I've done is I've marked on the backs of each piece the centre points to line up with for when we join them. And the first things to join are the top lining contrast piece with the side piece. And I'm using the marks like so. I just match them up. And just hold them for now. And we sew these at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we open it up and we top stitch on the lining side. So I've top stitched along there, and now we need to join the bottom to the sides, and I'm going to join them in the middle, and this time we stitch at 3/8 inch seam allowance. Then once I've stitched, I'll open this up and making sure the seam's pointing towards the centre of the bottom, top stitch that. So I shall attach both sides and come back when it's done. Here's the gusset ready made, and I top stitch there as well. So we just pop the gusset aside for now, and we're going on to the recessed zip. And what I've got is I've got 2 lining pieces and 2 exterior pieces. Now the instructions for this are on the Shamballa Bags website. So you can find the tutorial for it there, and I'm going to show you. Slightly different with the tutorial, it says to mark 1/2 inch line in. I actually mark not 1/4 inch, sorry. I mark 1/2 inch, so that rather than trying to fold on the line I've marked, I fold to the line I've marked. And you can use vinyl or glue. I'm using glue. I don't always use glue because some vinyl scorches with glue. This vinyl is beautiful though and doesn't mind glue. So if you've got time to wait for it to dry, then it's good to use the glue, because sometimes the double-sided tape can come undone with vinyl, and I want it to stick fast whilst I'm using it. So what I do now is fold over to the line that I've marked at 1/2 inch. Just press down and hold it for a moment. get one of my quilting clips. That's it. And then the same at this end. There we go. Oops, pulled that one off slightly. So I should put them there to dry, and then the same with the other side, but I am going to use double-sided tape because this will stay put. And this is the sewable double-sided tape because we will be sewing on this part. So don't use the type of double-sided tape that isn't sewable, because it will gum your needle up like crazy, cause your thread to break and all sorts. So yeah. And there we go, we've prepared all 4 pieces by folding the ends over by 1/4 of an inch. And I shall come back when the glue has dried on the vinyl pieces. Okay, so these panels will be dry, and the thing I didn't think of was to prepare the zip at the same time. So, just want to show you. Is this end? Yes. The end that's going to be open, such as this end, you need to mark at the end. I'm just going to make them equal. The ends need to be an equal length. Like so. So as you can see, they are equal. And then we need to mark 1/2 inch from the end. Or 1 inch, you can do more if you want to. And then what we need to do is fold at the line and then bring the zipper teeth up round the back like so, so that you've got a diagonal piece across. So I'll show you again. I'll do it bigger so that you can see. Fold at the line and then get the teeth at the back and bring up to meet the fold that you've made, so that you'd have it looking like this. So again, folding at the line, bring the teeth up, and then I just get some glue in there and in there. And then I'll get a couple of clips to keep them in place whilst it dries. And as I said, I should have done that in the first place, so I'm going to have to wait again. And then exactly the same for the other side. I find it a bit more fiddly on this side because I'm right-handed. so you'll see that your bend should be equal on each side. It's very important that they match up. So they can sit and dry. I just noticed this one's coming undone. And I'm actually going to do another step while we're waiting for it to dry, because I would like to just get on. I'll just hold that down whilst that glues. No, in fact, no, I can't do that. Oh yes, we can. Beg your pardon. Okay, so whilst they dry, I'm going to do my pockets and get my lining pieces, and I'm doing a zip pocket on one side and a slip pocket on the other. I'm trying to get the pattern piece to stay still. So I get one lining piece. I've got a bigger piece that I made for the slip pocket, and I've actually measured this to be 10 inches across and 11.5 inches long. And we fold it right sides together, and stitch down, along, leave a gap, and then back up again. All the sides I do at 1/4 inch seam allowance, the bottom I do at 1/2 inch seam allowance, to give us a nicer size seam to fold in and stitch. Once we've stitched the seams for the pocket, I cut diagonally. I always double stitch on the pockets, on the corners, to reinforce them, so that when we're poking the corners out, we shouldn't go through the seam. You notice how I say shouldn't and not won't, because it's a bit like commentator's curse, isn't it, when you say something won't happen and then it does. Okay, so I now want to turn it right side out. And I like to use a sort of medium to heavyweight interfacing for the slip pockets, because it just gives them a bit of firmness, which I think they need. You could use fusible fleece on one side of the slip pocket if you wanted to give it that bit of stability. But I use the cotton woven interfacing from Crackers Fabrics Facebook group. I love it. It's a lovely interfacing to use. So that's got them. I'm just going to turn my iron on and then get my little gadget for poking the corners out. It's my Clover tracer pen for tracing carbon onto pattern. You know, when you want to trace a pattern onto your fabric and use carbon paper, that's what it's for. Okay, so pushing all the corners out. Okay. Just get the ironing pad and press. Now these seams want to curl in on themselves, so you just have to coax it to stay out. Just turn my steam on as well. and I've pressed the seam in. Because I left such a good seam allowance of 1/2 inch, it just automatically went in, folded in. So that's nice and easily done. I'm not going to use double-sided tape to keep it closed. It's going to stay closed as I stitch it. So all I need to do now is top stitch along the top edge. Right, so that's top stitched. I'm just turning this upside down. And it's quite handy having these lines actually, because I know that that's even. So this gives me a nice even playing field for laying the pocket down. Now I've got to bear in mind that the seam allowance for the contrast band, so if you imagine this is going to be added, and then if you fold that down, imagine folding it down anyway, so that will be very close to the top and the zip's going to be there. So I want to make sure I place it low enough not to be a problem. So this is actually, I'm going to place it 2 inches down from the top, and it's 1 3/4 inch from that end and 1 1/2. So I just want to go this way slightly, like so, and I'm happy with that. So I just pin in place. And while I'm here, I need to mark it to be a big pocket. I want to have a halfway, so it's 2 smaller pockets. So measuring this, do measure halfway for your pocket, whatever size you've come out at. Mine's 4 3/4. So I'm going to stitch around the outside and then up through the middle. Okay, so I've stitched everywhere. Just snip the thread ends. So. And there should be enough residual heat from the iron to just iron out the heat dissolvable ink. That's it. So that's the slip pocket made. Nice size. It's nice size for a mobile phone, for example. And mine's in a quite a chunky pocket as well, so that's the perfect size. Or whatever else you want to put in it. And now for the zip pocket, and I get my zipper facing piece, which I think, looking at that does my eyes in a bit. So, shall I change it? What to do? Yes, I'm going to change that for a dark black one. Plain black, I think that's too much. So I need to cut a piece out and come back. Okay, so I've done a black one, which is a lot better. I could have done white as well, so whichever I fancied. And what I need to do is, this is 8 inches by 1.5 inches, and I draw a line 1/2 inch in from the end, 1/2 inch up from the edge. And just notice that slight slightly skew-iffy. So I've drawn the box, and now we just need to cut it out, and you can either do it freehand or with your ruler. And I'm just looking for my scissors, my snippers. Oh, I don't know what I've done with them now. Oh, here they are. These ones, they're lovely for doing this. And I just make sure I snip to the corner. And then straight across. And the same this end. And there we have our rectangle with the nice gap. Now I get my double-sided tape and put the tape along the outer edges. And again, I want to put the pocket 2 inches down from the top. And marking centrally, it's 6 1/4 inches in the middle. And just draw the halfway line there. Like so. Just going to lift that slightly and lay that a little bit straighter. That's it. Just check that we are equal. 1 3/4. I always measure and re-measure. So sorry, that's 2 1/4, just under 2 1/4. So it's not what I would call. Oh no, that is okay actually. Right, so what we need to do now is stitch around the outside edges of the box. So there we have the rectangle stitched, and then we just want to cut the fabric out of the middle . Okay, so that's the centre cut out, and now we need to do the zip, add the zip. And by the way, this tutorial for the zip pocket is also on the Shamballa Bags website, so do take a look. Okay, so I take one row of double-sided tape off and leave the other one intact whilst I lay it down first of all. Like so. And then peel the bottom off. I'm happy with that. And then we'll do another lot of double-sided tape. I do one on this side of the stitching, on the inside of both rows, top and bottom. And basically above and below the zip. That didn't go straight. And then we get our pocket piece and we peel the bottom tape off first. And lay the bottom edge of the zip pocket lining along there. And then we take it to the machine and we just stitch along the bottom here. Okay, so I've just stitched along the bottom, and then we turn it over, finger press, and then peel the top tape off and fold the bottom edge up to go along there. And now we go back to the machine, stitch along the edge, along the top and down. Okay, so there's the lining attached, like so. And all we need to do now is stitch the sides closed. So that's the pocket made. And the other thing I do on this side is to just add my little label. So I've already earlier on glued the raw edges down and folded them over a little bit. And then I just add a little bit of double-sided tape. And pull the backing off. I fold it in half, right sides together. And I've got the little line that I made earlier for the centre of the pocket facing. So I place it there. And then I just stitch the edges down, and that's that made. So I shall go and do that, and then we're going to return to do the zipper, a recess zipper. Okay, so now everything is dried. What we start with for the recess zipper is a lining piece, and we get to our zip. And we just need to mark 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre in from the edge And then we put some double-sided tape all the way along the edge from that line. Peel the backing off, and then we get our zip right side up, and we put the edge at the line that we've marked and go all the way along. You can, if you want to, hold it with clips rather than using tape. And then we get our exterior panel piece. We just put some more double-sided tape, this time all the way along. And we put this right side down, and we make sure that the ends match. That is very important. So we want the edges to match, and we want the two ends to match as well. Right, and all we need to do now is stitch along there a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just straight along. Okay, so I've stitched all the way along. Just going to, oh, that wasn't trim. I was going to say trim the edge off, but I didn't need to. And then I'm just going to fold the fabric back onto itself, onto the wrong sides together, and just press this seam down, making sure I don't catch the vinyl side. And then I get my Teflon sheet and quickly do that. I don't want to spend too long because I could scorch the vinyl. Some vinyls you can't even do that with, so be careful. Okay, so now we go to the machine and we stitch up there along the top and down. Okay, so that's that side finished. And then we need to do the opposite side. And so we get the lining side again, and right side up, double-sided tape all the way along until 3/8 of an inch away from the end. So I did just guess that, but I'm just going to check. Oh, I was right as well, so that was a good guess. But I don't leave it at guessing, I do make sure. And then starting at the 3/8 of an inch mark. and more double-sided tape. And again, as I said before, you don't have to use the double-sided tape. You can use clips or, you know, whatever you like, or temporary base stitch it. So lay down the top or the exterior piece right side down. I'm just going to turn it around so I can see the edge better. And then I'm going to just stitch along there again at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've stitched along there, and I need again get my ironing pad, and we need to press the panels down. Okay, and then again as before, stitch up along the top and down again. Okay, so this is the recessed zipper panel made, and it's nice to just double check that everything is even, and this bit here is even. If it looks off, please just redo it, start fresh. Don't add it to your bag, because it really will stick out like a sore thumb and you'll never be happy with it. It will always bug you. So it's just a little bit of fabric and a little bit of zip, just, you know, doesn't hurt to restart, because you do want a really good zip. So put that ironing pad away, and we'll go on next to adding it to our lining panels. Okay, so we get our recessed zipper piece that we've made, and we start with our zipper panel. Now if you're left-handed and you're wearing your bag on your left shoulder and you want to open the bag from front to back, you actually need to start with the opposite piece, which will be sat at the front of the bag when you put it together. The reason being is that this is for the right-handed opening of the bag, if you understand what I mean. So it's up to you which way you go about it. So we get our zipper panel piece, and I've marked the halfway point, and then I get my zipper panel, and I've again marked the halfway point. So I start by laying double-sided tape. I'm going to turn it round so I can see that I've gone to the edge enough, yes. Turn it back round so that you can, I'm not confusing you with the angles. So we get our recessed zipper piece and we place it right side up so that you're looking at the exterior on the top, and we line it up with the center pop mark that we've made earlier, and lay it down. Again, I'm turning it around so I can see that I'm actually on the edge. get some double-sided tape again. Don't need to do that bit because I've already stuck it. And we place the contrast band face down with the straight edge, so right side down, lining up the centre mark that I've marked earlier as well. And now again I'm turning it around so I can see. I just don't like to confuse you by having things upside down. It's easier if you see it the right way up. And I'm going to stitch all the way along at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then once I've stitched that, I'm going to open it up and top stitch on the lining side. Okay, so I stitched along and then I opened it up and I made sure the seam was facing down, and then I top stitched. Just trim the threads. So that's the one side of the zipper panel attached, and then we need to do exactly the same for the other side. Now if you want to, and if you're good at adding the zipper pull back, you can just take this off and stitch them independently. I don't always like to risk it, and I did have a bit of trouble getting this zipper pull on for some reason, so I'm going to leave it. So I get my other side, which I've made the slip pocket on, and I've marked my halfway point, and again with the recess zipper, sorry, couldn't think then what to call it. I'm sure we all get moments like that. I get them more and more nowadays. Okay, so we line up again, matching the lines that we marked for the halfway points. Oh, and by the way, when I stitched on here, where I could feel the zip started and ended, I reinforced that stitching so it wouldn't pull apart once it was open like that. So you may want to do that also, it's up to you. So we put that down, and then more tape. And I'm just going to turn this around for adding this part. And lining up the marks. And as before, going to stitch along 1/4 inch seam allowance, open up and top stitch on the lining side. Okay, so that's both panels stitched and the recess zip added. And what we have left to do now is to add the gusset. Now, as I said before, you may find it easier to do this without the zip being attached together, but I'm going to try and do it with it being intact, because it really was a nightmare adding the pull, because it's a chunkier pull than usual. So we get our gusset that we made earlier, and we need to mark our halfway points. Okay, so I'm going to start by joining at the halfway point so they're matching. Now, because we have this contrast band, and we do here, and yes, I know they're different colours, that was on purpose because of the fact that we've got the black and white theme, and also on the exterior of the bag we've got the black on the front and the white on the end, so I just wanted it all to tie in, so I haven't made a mistake. And then we want to match up the where the lining starts, just so that we've got an even match, because you really need the lining edges to match up nicely. And then we start by pinning round. And you shouldn't find that you've got an excess of fabric on either side, but if you do, you'll have to do what we call easing them together. So you sort of, the place where you've got the excess fabric, the side that you've got the excess fabric, just slightly loosen it as you go round. So if this was a lot of fabric, then I'd just add a little bit extra there, pin it, a little bit extra, so on. And that's how you do easing the fabrics, if I made sense. In fact, I think I can show you. I think this is slightly, see, okay, good. So this is slightly too big, look at that extra, and I don't want a fold. So I'm going to just I've just left a little bit excess fabric there, and again just sort of push it, so can you see, just a little bit. It won't be noticeable once it's sewn together, but a big pleat or fold in the fabric would be. So you really want to ease it together. You'll see when I've done it that it will work. I'll show you how it looks. So I am happy that that worked, that happened really, so I could actually show you. Okay, so I have eased the fabric round. Can you see where you've got the little bits of excess that won't show? And again on this side, matching the seam . And then I think we should have the same problem here. Yes, we do. So again, just to ease the fabric. Okay. And we're going to start with the stitching at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then gradually move out, and by the time we get here we should be at 1/2 inch all the way round to here, and then again go in to 1/4 inch seam allowance. That just ensures for a nice snug fit with the lining. Okay, so I've attached to one side of the lining, and as you can see, there's tiny little gathers, but nothing major. But when you look on the other side, it's all smooth as a baby's bottom. No definite lines, creases, etc. So that, if you haven't already known how to, that's how you ease fabric. Now we've got to do exactly the same with the other side, and I wanted to show you that we've matched up as well, that we've matched the seams up on each side. Now the other side we do exactly the same, only we're going to leave as large a gap as we dare at the bottom. So I'm going to leave a gap from there to there to turn the bag through. Okay, so I've sewn both sides, left the gap, and I've ironed the seam to make it easier just to close later on, and I've snipped round the curves to just help the fabric spread nicely. So that's the inside of the bag done. I'm not sure, I don't think you can see, I think it's a bit dark. And the remaining, I'm trying to close it. Okay, I have inadvertently twisted this panel round once so that the zip isn't able to close up. So I have to do that to be able to untwist it. So if that happens to you, it's easily resolved, but I've had to take the zip off anyway now. So now I need to add it evenly. Which is a bit annoying, but there you go. These things happen. And I do like to show you the problems when they arise and what I do to get out of it. So, oops. Butterfingers. Okay, so what I'm going to do is line up the zip and clamp it, because it needs to be equal, and then slide it down a little bit and just hook it onto the other side. I'm trying to show you, so it's a bit awkward, I'm a bit cack-handed, but right, so let's see how that goes, if that does up evenly. If it doesn't, I shall undo it and do it again. Right, let's have a look. Perfect. Phew. That is lucky. Double checking just to make sure. Yeah. Okay, I've managed to do that without too much of an issue, or without any issue. And just, I want to straighten the zip end now. Stop it fraying. And I've got my little zip end there, which I think I said I got from Bag Kits and Glitzy Glitz Facebook group. And my glue, and this little gadget I got from Amazon. It's like a toothpaste tube holder. I think you get a pack of 3, so I'm always being asked about it and I forget to say. So we fold it over the back, and I always make sure that I get this end in first, because it can bunch up and not go in smoothly like that. just want to use something to poke the zip down inside. Scissors aren't probably the best thing to use. I should probably use my tweezers or something, but anyway, it's working. Okay, happy with that. Get my screwdriver. So I always add some glue. It just makes me feel it's a bit more secure. Then screw it in fully. And there we have a very nice zip end. Like so. Okay. I haven't added the connectors, so I'm going to add them now that everything's out of the way. And they're low enough not to cause an issue. If they'd have been higher up here, then I'd have waited till the end, till I put the lining in, turned it right side out and gone through the bottom of the lining to just connect these. But these aren't going to cause an issue when stitching. So I pop the posts through the holes. I think you can see that. And then put the washer on. I'm sorry if you can't see it fully. I do try to show everything, but it can be a bit difficult at times. Just pop the screws on. Just these two for starters. I don't screw them all the way in. I screw all of them part way in until all three are connected, and then I tighten them up. And that's the connector added. I shall connect the other one and then return to complete the bag. The thing to do for the inside is the zip end. Okay, so both connectors are on, and now we need to put the bag together. So we make sure that the zip pocket is at the back, and we're putting the bag in with the front facing, and have to just squeeze it in and make sure all the fringe is tucked down. And make sure that the zip is tucked down out of the way. Okay, So now we want to line up the seams. And don't worry if your gusset is a bit shorter than the top, because we're going to do a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. It really doesn't matter. So I'm lining up with the highest of the seam allowance of the gusset pieces. I don't think I'm making sense, but there you go. There we go. Gosh, my arm aches, my shoulder aches. And now we stitch all the way around the top at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I've stitched around the top, and what I did was, before I stitched, I drew a line where that point was, so that when I was stitching I could see at which point I needed to turn it. And then I've cut down into it to the point, and I've gone quite close, as close as I dare, because when you turn it you don't want it all puckering. And then I've snipped around the curves. I also double stitched over these seams just to reinforce them. So that's everything stitched, and because my vinyl is very thin, I haven't trimmed it. I trimmed the foam out of the seam, but not the vinyl. If your vinyl is very thick, just cut one layer so that you've got a gradual rather than a dead stop when you turn it. So I shall go away, ask my husband to turn it because I can't, my hands aren't strong enough anymore, and come back when it's turned. Okay, so the bag's been turned, and I just checked that I was happy with the point here before I close the bag. So as long as that's okay and all the stitching's okay all the way around, which it is, then we can close the bottom. So as you can see, earlier on I did iron the seam, so it's nice and easy to put together and stitch. So I shall do that next before we proceed further. So here's the bag turned right side out, and I've sewn the seam closed, and I've pinned my lining ready to top stitch. So I'm going to go and top stitch now, and I shall show you the result shortly. So here she is, top stitched. I'm happy with the top stitching, and now I put her aside to make the strap next. Right, for the strap we need the length that's mentioned in the pattern, which my vinyl is, and I'm using one colour of one and one of another, which is slightly narrower, and it's a bit different to the pattern. The reason being is I'm going to do the strap in one like that, and on the reverse I'm going to have this, which is slightly narrower. So this one is 2 inches wide, and this should be 1 3/4 inches wide. So do the length that the pattern mentions, and do, if you're doing it this way, otherwise do 4-inch wide. Now the pattern's very easy to understand on what you have to do for the vinyl, for the strap. So that's why I'm not worried about wandering from the pattern. So what we need to do is draw a line along the centre, and all the way, and then basically using double-sided tape or glue, and I'm going to be using double-sided tape, we need to go all the way along and then we pull the backing off, and fold it in. Now if you're doing the 4-inch wide strap that you're going to fold in and then in again, don't do to the line. You want to do a slight gap between the two for folding in again. But this isn't going to be refolded, it's literally just the edges are coming into the middle, and then the two the sides with the seam are going to go together to hide the seam. You will see as we go along. Okay, once we've done that, we'll put that aside and do the other one. And we have to draw a line down the centre of this one as well, which is 7/8 of an inch in, because obviously it's 1 inch and 3/4 wide. Okay, so that's both straps prepared, and then we get the first strap that we did and we put it face down, so right side down with the seam facing upwards, and put some double-sided tape again. Okay, so we need to peel both sides off. I only go so far with it, so don't get into a sticky mess. And just place it equally. I mean, you have to use your eyes really. It's too narrow to put lines, etc. really. And it's quite easy to do, as you can see. Okay, so this is a bit longer, I don't know why, but I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to stitch up the sides on this side so that I can see where I need to stitch, very close to the edge along the black. Okay, so I've sewn the strap. You can just see the edges poking out of the other side, which is what I wanted. And we start with the strap handle. I'm just going to pop that inside. We get the slider. Oops. And we just put the slider on and through. And I actually want to do it so it's 4 inches. I forgot to measure. We want to do 4 inches from the end of the strap to measure, and then we just need to mark for the rivets. So we mark 3/4 of an inch from the end because we're adding a end strap end, whichever you want to say, and then 1/2 inch again. So I've marked for the 2 rivets. If that mark comes off, I'll do it again. And then we pop the slider through, the strap through the slider. And I now want to mark for, put the holes for the rivets. So we do the first hole. Oh, okay. Then the second hole. And then we fold it over to the line that I made first. And pop the, I never do the both sides together because it can go skew-whiff and you can end up with the back of the hole coming out in the wrong place. So I do them separately like this to get an even hole, so it's in the centre and not off to the side anywhere. So I put the rivets in. I always put the post side on the good side. That way, if something goes wrong with adding the rivet and I have to remove it, I always remember where this side is on, because this is the side that you have to use to remove with the pliers. I get my green machine and that's both rivets added. And when I've done everything to the strap, I will add the strap end afterwards. So the bag will be on this side, so that my hip will be here, and that will be outwards. So I have to think about where I want the strap, the double part of the strap, and I want it behind me. So I put the strap end into the rear one and bring it up through the slider. Like this. So you basically got the loop in the back. And then through the back of the slider, like so. So we've got the strap like this, and then we put this other end up through here, and we'll mark for the 4-inch and rivet and so on. And that, then we've got the slider where we can adjust the length of the strap. I'm going to go off and do that and then come back and show you. Okay, so I've put it through and I've added the strap end on one end, and to show you what I did, I get the end of the strap and I want to put the whole side on the side that faces the strap. So I put that on, place it where I want it to be, and mark where the holes are. Got to do different colours because one's on white and one's on black. Okay, so I then remove it and I get my screw punch, and I don't want to quite put holes in all the way. I want to just basically get out a little bit of the fabric like such, like you can see there. So there's still a little bit of the, like the one side of the vinyl, and the reason for doing this is if we don't put those holes in, then all the screws are going to do is squash the fabrics down. The screws aren't going to go in there properly, and you really don't want that. You want them to screw into the vinyl, and it also makes them far more secure. See, they're going much easier, and they don't push the vinyl together, they screw into it. So I shall show you. Oops. So if you look, can you see how it's not squashed? Not squashed in there, and that's because of the holes that we've made. So that's the bag made, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I'm going to just slightly steam these because they've curled a bit, just to flatten them, because of where I've been using it and they've been rolling up a little bit. So I'm just going to add a little bit of steam over them and then place them down. That will flatten them out again. I'm looking forward to seeing your bags in my group. Happy stitching.